All right, Shy Boy, here's this very simple circuit diagram that I drew that hopefully you'll be able to understand since you're studying this. So here's your battery. You've got your negative from the battery, that's your ground, that should go directly straight to the bilge pump. So the negative wire coming into the bilge pump should be black. That one should just go straight to the primary negative terminal of the whole battery pack. So that's going to be the one closest to the back of the boat on, I don't know which side of the boat it's on. It will depend on which boat you're on, but it'll be the battery that's closest to the back of the boat. When you open up the battery compartment and look, it'll be the one that has a whole bunch of shit attached to it. Most importantly, the black converter box will be attached to it. Should have like at least 4 or 5 different cables coming to it because it'll have the negative from the battery charger, the negative from the converter, potentially the negative going straight to the bilge if that's not coming from the converter. Anyways, it's the one with all the wires going to it that has a negative marked on it, okay? So that we've already confirmed is good, so you don't need to do anything with it, because if you measured with a multimeter here and you got 12 volts, then this has to be good. So don't worry about that. So now the question is, we have 2 switches. We have a dash switch, which I'll label this one dash switch. And we have a float switch, so I'll label this one float. Basically, the way the system works is the positive comes from the battery and goes into the dash switch. When you push the dash switch on, the circuit is completed here, and all of a sudden, electricity flows through here to the bilge pump starts running, okay? So what you need to do is you need to turn on the dash switch, and once the dash switch is on, if on this side of the dash switch you're getting 12 volts positive, that means that the dash switch is working, okay? That's how we know the dash switch is working. Honestly, I seriously doubt the dash switch went out. The float switch, however, I think it's more likely it could have gone out. At some point after it leaves the battery, these split. One of them goes to the dash, the other one comes into the float switch. So this will probably be one of the 2 plugs on the float switch, or one of the 2 wires in the float switch, and it will be the one that does not directly connect to the bilge pump. So what you need to do is you need to test on this side of the float switch. Okay, so you'll touch the multimeter here, and you'll touch the multimeter here to see if we're getting 12 volts. I think you already did that. If in fact we're getting 12 volts across these 2, then you know the float switch is getting the supply it needs. So then the next thing you want to do is go to the other wire coming out of the float switch with the positive, test from here to here, but in order to do it, you're going to have to complete the circuit, which means you have to lift the float switch up. With the dash switch, you push the dash switch on. With the float switch, to activate it, you have to lift the float switch up. So test on the outgoing one, the one that goes from the float switch to the bilge pump, positive. The one going straight to the bilge pump, negative. Lift the float switch up. If you get 12 volts then you know in fact, and make sure when you do this that you disconnect this one so it's not getting a false reading from that system. And same thing here. When you're testing the dash the first time around, make sure the float switch is not lifted up. Because if the float switch is lifted up, then you'll be getting a reading here, even though this may not be working. Okay, so each time you test the dash or the float switch, you need to make sure the other one is not activated so that the circuit is not complete. So, assuming that the dash switch is delivering 12 volts and the float switch is delivering 12 volts, then the problem is more likely than not the bilge pump. The only other potential thing it could be is that on the negative, they sometimes, I don't know what the symbol is for this, but sometimes there will be a fuse wired in line. Okay, so if you happen to see that, okay, we're getting 12 volts, everything looks good, my suggestion, the best way to test it would be to cut here, take the bilge pump by itself, and hook the negative and the positive directly up to the batteries to get 12 volts. So what that would look like would be this. Hold on, I'm going to draw it. Okay. Positive, negative. Keep in mind that the batteries are 6-volt batteries, not 12 volts. So it's important that you connect it to 2 of the batteries. So, okay, let's say here's 2 of the batteries in the boat. Here's one, here's another one. You've got negative here, positive here, negative here, positive here. You're going to look for 2 batteries that have their positive and negative ends connected. Because what that does by connecting the positive and negative ends is it essentially turns this battery into one big 12-volt battery with a negative terminal here and a positive terminal there. Okay, so this 6-volt here, negative, positive, that positive goes to this negative. Now this terminal, which is this terminal, and this terminal, which is this terminal, are providing 12 volts. You can test it with a multimeter before you hook the bilge pump up. Anyways, if you cut these wires, take the bilge pump and hook it directly up to here, it should start zzz, buzzing. If it doesn't buzz, you know definitively the bilge pump is bad. If it does budge, or if it does turn, then you know the problem is somewhere else. That's when you're going to start trying to look for this fuse, because more likely than not, this fuse is the problem. Okay, so what you'll do, you'll look for the fuse. 9 times out of 10, the fuse is inside of the battery compartment, somewhere very close to the battery. And again, it'll be on the wire that's coming off of the negative. So what you want to do is, of all the 5 or 6 wires that are attached to the negative terminal of the main battery bank, check them and see if any of them have fuses coming on them, which the one going to the converter definitely will. The one that's going to the bilge pump should. If there's a fuse, check it, see if the fuse is blown. That could be the problem as well, okay? So we're checking for voltage at the bilge pump with the dash switch on first, checking for voltage at the bilge pump. Checking for voltage at the bilge pump with the dash switch on, making sure the float switch is off first. Second, we're checking for voltage at the bilge pump with the float switch on, making sure the dash is off. That confirms both of these mechanisms are working good. Once we've confirmed both of those work fine, we're assuming the problem is the bilge pump, so you disconnect it, making sure you pay attention to where it was connected to previously, connect it directly to the battery to see if that's the problem. If bilge pump doesn't work, replace the bilge pump, simple fix. If the bilge pump does work, got to try and find the fuse.